What is up, guys? And welcome to the Jungian blog. How you guys doing? Hope you're doing well. I'm doing alright, as evidenced by my slightly disheveled appearance. But that's just me. What do you expect? Anyway, so cool. In today's entry, I wanted to talk about something that Teal Swan talked about in her latest video, right? And that is incompatibility, right? And really, that is, in many cases, in probably 99% cases, the reason why relationships are destined to yield a lot of problems for us, basically a lot of unhappiness, a lot of grief, and it's a very uncomfortable truth, but it bears saying, I guess, right? But I kind of wanted to chip in with my own thoughts on the matter, and also kind of weave into it a few thoughts that I've already a few thoughts and perspectives that I've already kind of introduced in this channel, right? Because I had I had an idea in terms of this might be a perspective that might be useful to people in kind of facing this thing of problems with people and loved ones, and how do we get along, who should change more so that the other person is satisfied, and should you even change, and all of this stuff, right? This entry is not supposed to be a hey, this is this is the solution, this will solve all of your problems. No, this is really, this is just a perspective, and it's only one kind of aspect of this entire thing of human relationships. It's endless, right? So it's only one side of it, but I think that it's going to be quite useful, at least in my opinion, in terms of just at least getting it straight in your mind, in terms of how you want to approach your problems, with others in your life, right? But and actually what I'm about to talk about is, and so it's actually related to another theory that I really like, right? Which is MBTI, right? And if you're not familiar with MBTI, it's basically it's a kind of a personality test typing, personality type kind of a thing, but it also goes deeper, it goes into things that are basically, it's basically Jungian psychology that it goes into, and so that is somewhat related to what I want to talk about, right? But really, yeah, that's kind of related to what I want to talk about, right? But yeah, so I guess I'll give a bit of background, in case you clicked on this video and you're who is this guy? What is he talking about? What do you have to say about this, right? And it's yes, so you probably clicked on this video, if you're not already subscribed to me, because you have a problem with someone in your life, or a bunch of people, right? And it's or with yourself, in terms of I don't know how I can coexist with other people, right? Whether it be that you're someone who is you just feel you can't be yourself around other people, or you can't really, you don't feel free and able to do the things that you want to do in your relationships. And I'm saying relationship, I'm guessing that the most common thing where this manifests is probably in romantic partnerships, but it also applies to familial relationships, and friendships, any kind of relationship that you have with someone, right? And yeah, so whether you're that person, or you're someone who is just going along, and everything was fine, but then suddenly the people around you start accusing you of things and getting upset with you, and you're what, and they're you're smothering me, you won't let, and either that, or they just disappear, or they're non-committal, and you're just left, and you're what can I do to get someone to just like be real with me and like not run away, right? And it's like, you know, I kind of talked about this thing a bit, like in my previous entries, right? So, you know, I guess check some of them out if you're interested in you know, things like aggressive versus passive tendencies and things like that, right? You know, narcissism versus codependency, like, which is something I thought like that's been my most popular entry so far. But anyway, so yeah, you know, it's like, hey, you have an issue, and it's just like you don't know what to do, and you don't know, like, maybe you've been thinking about it, and it's like, maybe this relationship is just destined to fail. Maybe, like, you know, maybe it is just incompatibility, and it's just like irreconcilable differences, you know. And, you know, maybe it's time for me to move on, or maybe you're torn, and I'm guessing that, like, you probably are torn, right? Because, like, on one hand, you're like, this is not working, right? Or like, I don't know what to do, I feel trapped, you know, like, my family doesn't see things my way, and like all my friends like take advantage of me, or like, you know, or like no one seems to like me, you know. But you're torn between like, okay, like maybe I should move on, or like you're like, I want to make it work, right? And I guess depending on your like temperament, like you'll be more inclined to do one or the other. Like, so if you're more kind of like me, which is like, I guess, more avoidant, like inclined, I guess, right? You know, like more like passive, then like maybe traditionally anyway, right? Then like maybe you're more inclined to leave and get away, and like sometimes that's the right choice, you know. Or like indeed, but if you're more kind of like anxious and like clingy, I know that's a very ugly word, but like clingy, and you're the one who's like, I want to make this relationship work, right? But, you know, then like you might want to like you might be seeking solutions for like the relationship to be saved, right? And well, yeah, like, you know, obviously it's a very tough thing, you know, but like, you know, I hope that my perspective will help you in making that decision, right? Because again, I'm not, you know, I'm not you, and I can't make the decision for you, right? But like, yeah, you know, and the thing is that like sometimes the right thing to do is to kind of move on, right? You know, that's kind of all, like, you know, especially if you come to the conclusion that incompatibility is the reason that like that you and someone else doesn't get along, then like, yeah, you know, first like then you have to like think about like what you're going to do about it, and whether you actually have the courage to potentially leave that situation. But like once you get to a place where you're close, and you've been doing a lot of thinking, and you've been doing a lot of planning in your head, etc., then like, you know, it's always an option, right? And sometimes like it is the best thing for you, even though it's painful and everyone gets hurt in the process, you know. But like, there is another way, which was proposed by Teal at the end of her video, right? You know, I'm not trying to spoil her video, but like basically at the end of the video, like she proposes a solution which I think is very, very brilliant, honestly, which is like, you have to think about like reassigning the roles in for the people in your life, right? So like, ultimately it's like, well, do you want to say goodbye to this person forever? Which honestly sometimes is maybe the thing that's needed, or like is what is necessary, like that like they just change roles, right? Maybe that person is not meant for you in a romantic sense, but maybe like they make a really, really great friend, and that's the reason why that's the kind of aspect about them that you like, right? You know, or you know, or like maybe like, you know, you just need to like make it clear to your family that like you're no longer a child, and like you need to start to kind of lay the groundwork for like a life where you can be an adult doing your own thing, living by yourself, and you'll still, you know, you'll still keep in contact with your parents or your family, but it's just that like, you know, and this one's a bit more difficult, right? But like, you know, it's like transitioning from being like, you know, like a dependent, like underneath your parents, you know, or your family, to like being like a separate entity, but like still like kind of like keeping in contact, and like, you know, that kind of thing. So, you know, and I think that's the right thing to do, because like, you know, people change, and like people are people, they're never gonna fully disappear from your life, right? you know, well, as long as they're people, right, in your life, but like, yeah, you know, but like, regardless, you know, so yeah, you know, that's your decision. Like, we all have the responsibility to kind of just make our own lives, really. But like, anyway, so the thing I want to talk about is really, it's like I said, it's based on MBTI. Like, so basically, okay, so like when you talk about political views, right? So like really, this is like what I'm providing to you in this entry is like, it's like basically some clarity in terms of how people are different, right? So like we know, maybe you know that like you're incompatible with someone else, right? But like you want to figure out how, and like, you know, what you can do about it in terms of like maybe you can help yourself and that person like get to people who are more compatible with you, you know, but also understand like more deeply like, you know, what your own preferences are in terms of people, instead of just like kind of like wishing and hoping that like the next person you meet is going to be like amazing, right? So like, yeah, so in like, you know, when you discuss political views, like it's common to say like, oh, I'm a liberal, or like I'm a conservative, right? Those are kind of like the two like overarching kind of attitudes like that you have in terms of politics, right? But like those views actually extend beyond politics, right? You know, you can have like, you can be liberal like in a sexual way, right? You know, versus conservative in a sexual way, right? And as such, like it's actually the case that like you tend to kind of be like a bit mixed in terms of like, you know, your views on things, right? And this is the case with politics, right? You know, I'm not really trying to talk about politics, but I'm using it as an illustration, right? Because there tend to be like political parties, right? And they tend to stand, you know, traditionally for like, we are the liberal left-wingers. And then like the other side is like, we are the right-wing conservatives, right? And so like you have these parties that represent each ideal. However, like the individual person tends to be like more mixed, if they're being honest with themselves, right? You know, they might be like predominantly one way, and therefore like that informs their ultimate voting decision, right? But like generally speaking, like, you know, individuals are liberal in some ways and they're conservative in other ways, right? You know, for example, you might be liberal when it comes to free speech, right? You know, you might be like, hey, like, you know, people can say whatever the hell they want, you know, because like I wouldn't want someone to like limit my ability to express myself openly. So I'm all for that. Doesn't matter what people say, they're just expressing their opinions. Like, you know, the more that we discuss that stuff, the better it's going to be for everyone, right? Because everything's kind of laid on the table, right? However, you could be conservative about certain legislations, for example, you know, you know, like, or like things like immigration law, you know, which is a bit controversial. Like I kind of don't want to get into that, but like, you know, my point is that like, you know, you and I and everyone else, like we all have certain things, areas in our lives where we're liberal, and certain areas where we're conservative. And like I say, it goes beyond just like your views on politics and like legislation and stuff like that. It also goes into your attitudes towards like aspects of life, right? You know, like how you live out your life, like which areas you're really interested in like kind of exploring, but which areas where you're more kind of like you want to maintain the status quo, right? And that's really like the broad definition of those two positions. It's like liberalism is about like, you know, you're open to like development, you're open to exploration, you know, you're open to like lots of contradictory, you know, kind of things happening where like everything is there, and like everything is open and accessible to everyone, right? You know, and like minimal limitations, minimal like, you know, kind of moderation. It should be as open as possible, right? Conservatism, which is the opposite, is like, you know, like it's more skeptical, it's more cynical, it's more like kind of limited. It's more like, okay, like what we have works and it's great and this is how I want it to be. and anything that deviates from this is a very likely detraction or disruption of what it already exists, right? You like, when you're conservative again, like towards something, like you're change averse, you're risk averse, you're like, like, why would you want to change that? It works perfectly well. Like, I don't want this to be changed. Like, please treat this with respect, right? Otherwise, I'm going to be very cross with you, right? So those are the broad kind of definitions, right? So like, this kind of ties into what I want to talk about, right? And like I mentioned MBTI earlier, right? And the reason I mentioned it is because it's at the core of what I want to talk about, which is like, okay, right. So in MBTI, there is something, there are 4 mental functions, right? So like, those are like the kind of modalities of like perception and judgment that we all possess, to varying degrees in terms of like our preferences, right? So like, there are 2 perceiving functions, right? Which is how we acquire information, right? One is sensing, and the second one is intuition. And then there are 2 judging functions as well, which is thinking and feeling, right? But like, that's another kind of area that I don't want to get into in this entry, right? Incidentally, if you're interested in MBTI, you like personality tests and stuff like that, and you don't have much experience with MBTI, or you're just interested in the topic, then I have an entry about that, right? And I think I actually, I also have like an article that I wrote on my old website, which I haven't updated in years, right? Jungian.com, where you can do some more in-depth reading about this kind of thing. But anyway, so like sensing and intuition, right? So like, sensing is basically everything that's to do with the physical world, right? Everything that's to do with things that are real and tangible and like touchable, I guess, right? Or like seeable, right? Everything to do with your senses, right? Hence sensing. And then there's intuition, which is a bit more difficult to define, but like, broadly speaking, it's more to do with like thoughts and like contextual like awareness, like meanings, connections, that kind of thing, right? But like, generally speaking, you can say it's like, it's people who are like, sensors are more concerned with things, and intuitives are more concerned with thoughts, right? And ideas, right? So like, there's the fundamental dichotomy, right? But like I mentioned that like, there's this other dimension, which is like, really, like in MBTI terms, it's extroversion and introversion, right? But it's extroversion and introversion. But like I mentioned, like liberal and conservative, right? So in the same way that like you can have differing views, like politically and politically, right? Like, the way that you approach these 2 modalities is also like potentially different, right? And this is really like, again, it's only one dimension, because we're talking about people, right? There could be a million ways and more, like, that feed into like why people are incompatible, right? But generally speaking, this is like in my mind, like quite an important, and I apologize if there's noise outside, like people are Tokyo drifting in the car park. What can you do? Well, okay, this is a good example, right? This is great, actually, because I wanted to give an example about this, right? But like, okay, so like, there are people who are liberal when it comes to the physical, right? They're about living life, as fully as possible, in a sense of like, I'm going to try as much stuff as possible. I'm ambitious. I want to succeed. I want to like create like a legend of myself in terms of like making a ton of stuff in the world, and influencing the world. And I don't want to sit still, right? I'm not concerned with like living a quiet life in the middle of like, on a meadow, on a farm, and that's just my entire existence. No, fuck that. I want to try as many things as I can. I want to engage. I want to test my limits. I want to see what's out there. And like some people like are just more outgoing in that way. you know. For the record, I'm naturally not one of these, right? I'm actually the second type, which I'll go into in a second, right? And I think my guess is like if you're following me, then you'll probably like more my type as well, right? You know, which is more like conservative when it comes to physical things, right? And so like, you know, these people are liberal physically, right? They love to explore, they love traveling, they hate staying in one place, they find it boring, you know. Like sometimes they even get a bit like frisky, you know, like they might get a bit like destructive, you know, in the sense of like, you know, like they play sports, they smash things, they shoot guns, they jump out of helicopters if they want to, you know, they do all kinds of weird shit like street art and like taxidermy, you know, as random examples, right? You know, they want to experience as much as possible, and like they want their lives to be centered around that, right? You know. However, right, seeing as they are liberal in the material sense, right, these people tend to be, and when I say tend to be, like, I mean like pretty much always, like, are conservative in the way that they think, right? So like, these people would be what I would class as SENI, right? This is an MBTI term, right? SENI is what's known as a function pair, right? It means extroverted sensing, introverted intuition, right? You know, which is, you know, technically it describes this precisely, right? It's like, they are liberal when it comes to materialism, but when it comes to thoughts, you know, they're a bit more like God. You know, they're not going to like accept your weird theories about like the meaning of like existence and like where we all come from, and they might entertain certain thoughts, right? But like they're never going to be like very like rigorous, right? You know, it's like, have you tried like, you know, talking to certain people like about spirituality and like, you know, and like psychology and philosophy, that like people who just like, they just get kind of freaked out by it, right? And or like they're very stubborn, like about like, you know, the attitude that you feel from them is almost like I you know, why are we talking about this? You know, like this is kind of way more thinking than we should need to do, right? Kind of a thing, right? You know, their beliefs are very like, you know, it's like, okay, this is the way it is. Like, you know, I'm here to live life, and like I'm not trying to understand like what makes someone tick psychologically. I'm not trying to understand different arguments in philosophy. Like, you know, I'm here to live life, right? And like anyone who tries to bring me down by telling me shit that like is weird, like I don't think I like them, right? You know. So that's one type, right? And then there's another type, which is the type I am, which is conservative in the physical and liberal in the ideological, you could say, right? You know, so like, yeah, you know, if you watch these videos, or if you yourself are someone who's interested in like exploring these ideas of like, you know, like what does it mean to be human, and like how do we design our lives in such a way, or like what can we how can I plunge to the very depths of who I am to like figure out who the hell I am, right? So like shadow work is basically what I described, right? And like basically if you enjoy shadow work, or let me rephrase that, if you are willing to do shadow work, and doing shadow work is no picnic, right? Then you're probably this second type, right? You know, if you're into like humanities and philosophy and like, you know, like thinking like in terms of like what is the human being capable of? What are we all capable of? Like what are the dynamics at play here? Because like nothing is as simple as it seems on the surface. If you're kind of one of these people, then you're, you know, the second type of person, right? You know, like try to get someone who isn't like this to talk about shadow work. You know, it's like, oh yeah, like, you know, like, hey, do you know that like sometimes people can use love to manipulate? But they can, and sometimes when people are being aggressive, they're actually being virtuous, right? And incidentally, the reason I mention that is because like that to me is like the cutting edge in terms of like exploration, right? I've seen it in like, these discussions, by other spiritual teachers like Teal, and I've also seen it in like certain media that I like, or, games and like, shows and stuff like that, right? But it's like kind of like subverting like the kind of like society, like the kind of like generally accepted view on like good and evil, right? Because it's like generally speaking, like, most people, like particularly those who are like ideologically conservative, like they have a very kind of like very firm and rigid like kind of to be honest, it's very like vulnerable. They're vulnerable in that way, and so like they're like, good is good and evil is evil. Why would it be any different? Why are you trying to tell me that like people could use love to manipulate me? And it's like, it's just painful, to entertain that. In the same way that it's painful for you to play basketball. Like basketball is like a super like competitive sport, right? And like I can see like the value in it because it's a competitive sport, but like it's like playing it is the most painful thing because it's like so intense and like I mean, like, it's not that bad, right? But it's just like, to me it's slightly barbaric. And I know that's very controversial. Okay, let me take that back. Like, I don't want to say barbaric, right? And this is what I mean, right? It's like, if I said that to someone, right, who was like ideologically conservative, like they would think I was like a bad person. Basically, it's like barbaric. That's a fucking terrible thing to say. Like, it's just a sport, like why would you say it's barbaric? It's not the same as like fucking hunting or something or killing people. Like that's a terrible thing to say, right? But that's kind of the truth. Like, maybe barbaric is, overshooting it, right? But like, it just feels like very dangerous to me, like to play sports in general. Like, unless it's like a sport, like a racket sport where you're on opposite sides of the court kind of a thing. But like basketball and like contact sports and things like that, it's like, martial arts. I'm like, oh man, I don't want to fight. Why do we need to fight? Can't we just all get along, Like, that's how it is for other people who like are ideologically conservative, right? They're like, if you have a weird worldview, or like if you start talking about like the darkness of humanity and what lies in the human shadow, human beings' capacity to manipulate and to like lie to themselves and then believe the lie, it's like they're like, oh, kind of a thing, right? So in the MBTI terms, this would be the opposite function pair, which is NESI, right? Extroverted intuition and introverted sensing, right? So like, the reason I present this to you is because like you will, you fall into one of these, and like the people in your lives fall into, quite possibly, if you're watching this video, the opposite, right? And so like, just think in your own life, like you have like a kind of variety of interactions that you have with different people, right? And there are some where you feel like more at home, and then there are others where you feel like more like you're being pushed to do stuff that you're uncomfortable with, right? And so like, this is very possibly like, a dimension that like you need to like kind of weigh up in terms of like, okay, like what type am I and what type is the other person, right? Because like, if you are like me, the second type, right? And all of your close friends or your family are people who like traveling and doing loads of crazy shit, and like, but and like whenever you try to talk to them about deeper things, they kind of like just like they kind of like, they almost kind of shy away from you, and then they start doing stuff, and you're like, ugh, and you just feel unseen. Then maybe it's a good idea to like, to like look for people, right, who are more like you, so that you can have that kind of relationship, right? And like I said, it doesn't mean that you need to get rid of the people in your life, it might mean that you need to have a slightly difficult conversation where you explain this to them. Just be like, okay, I watched this video by some random Chinese guy. Again, I don't know why I bring my race into it, but like, and he told me that there's this thing, where it's like, there are some people who are liberal physically and blah, 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 right? And it's like, I'm the second type, and like, this is your type, right? And obviously, there's more that goes into that. There's a lot that goes into that. You have to feed into yourself, because it's likely that, like, if you were brought up in a dynamic where you weren't able to be yourself fully, or like you had to hide who you really were, just like so that the whole group would get along, then like you don't have much confidence towards being yourself, right? So you have to build that by like connecting with like how you truly are and what you truly like, right? I have many videos that talk about this if you're interested, right? But once you start doing that, you need to be honest enough with yourself to be like, okay, like I'm this kind of a person, and the people in my life are this other kind of person, right? And it's like, it's not that I don't like them, or that I don't see any value in our connection. It's just that, like, this is not home for me. And, like, again, that might not go across very well, right, saying that, but it's like, okay, okay, it's not home for me, but that also means it's not home for you, right? What I would like, is that, like, if each of us were honest, and instead of, like, wasting our energy, and hurting ourselves by, like, being oblivious and ignoring this incompatibility, right, to seek out, while still maintaining the connection, but like, just, like, on the side, seek out, like, other connections. First of all, like, start to own who you are, right? And I feel, actually, it's a bit easier for people who are like me to do this, right? The kind of non-committal, like, passive types are, like, better at self-awareness in general, right? But, like, the kind of, like, more, like, let's say, narcissistic types, right? The more aggressive types. Excuse me. Like, tend to be more, like, kind of, like, afraid of, like, how this is. Like, because they're afraid of losing the relationship more. They're more anxious, right? But, like, you just have to, and, like, obviously, like, they're always, in some way, they're going to protest, right? It's because they're afraid, even though, like, that might not seem very convincing to you. In the start, fucking fuck. But, but it's just something that you have to get clear, right? Because it's like, hey, like, if you want to, like, have a certain life where, like, you just, like, you're happy with the things that you have, and you're, like, a more sensual person, and you're into kind of, like, enjoyment and zen, and, like, pleasure, and, like, art, and healing, and, like, just, like, being in this bubble of, like, warmth and, like, love, then, like, you're mismatched with someone who, like, is like, fuck that, let's get the fuck out of this place and do some shit, Let's do some shit, let's fucking, like, play, like, some tennis, or go, or, like, let's go to a different country, or, let's try this, let's try that. Like, you're never gonna be happy with that person, because it's not what you want as a home. You can have that kind of a friend, and, like, occasionally you can have a crazy adventure with them, and you'll learn to stretch yourself. And, like, not only that, like, those people will be able to help you in areas in your life where you're not as confident as they are, right? Because you're not as confident as them, like, when it comes to doing, like, more extroverted things in like, a physical sense, right? Because you're, like, you can, like, like, you're just, like, sat at home, you're like, ugh, please protect me from the world, And, like, you need someone who goes out there and does shit, right? Or, like, can protect you, like, in that kind of a way, right? Simultaneously, like, if you're someone who, like, is, like, you like having adventure, blah, blah, and, like, you like things to be, like, kind of, like, simple in terms of, like, hey, let's just try different shit, like, we're not gonna be talking about, like, psychology and, like, like, what is the meaning of existence and shit like that. And, like, even when we do, it's going to be like a very like vulnerable thing, as opposed to like someone like me, you know, who's like, oh, like check out this new theory, and then this new theory. Oh, like, oh, the latest thing from Teal Swan, you know, is talking about like blah, and it's like, you know, it's like, no, they just want people to be there to be like, hey, like, what, I wonder what we are, like, are we just things in like a universe, like where can we go? And it's just like, it's just very like kind of like vulnerable in that way, in the same way that you're like, you want to stay at home, and like that, and like your friend thinks it's fucking boring, like, and you're like talking to this person, and like they're more like ideologically conservative, and like they struggle with like talking about like deeper things, and you're like, oh my god, like, like, okay, you know, yes, you know, blah blah blah, you know, let me dumb things down. It's like, and I know that's a very, you know, not so great thing to say, but like, yeah, I hope my point is clear. Basically, it's like, this is not something that you're going to be able to change overnight. You know, it isn't, right? You know, you know, I'm speaking from my own experience. Like, I'm not even there yet. Where like, but like, I'm starting to understand. Like, okay, like, this is a very, very crucial dimension that you have to be aware of. Is like, okay, like, what kind of style do you have? And this is just one aspect of your own style, and there's many other aspects that you need to consider. But like, this is a very important one, which is like, okay, what do you value? Do you like, what are you more liberal in? Are you more liberal in terms of like physical, or ideological, and like ideas, and like conversation, and you know, and that kind of thing, right? You know, paradigms, you know, the thing that's very sexy to us, right? You know, or are you more conservative, and which one are you more conservative about? And then you have to evaluate that not only in yourself, but in other people in your life, right? So you can see, like, once and for all, like, are you actually compatible with that person, right? Not should you kick that person out of your life. Again, sometimes you might, because there might be some added stuff, like maybe that person's toxic, or like they're just so bad for you that you have to get the fuck out of there, so that you might one day stand a chance and come back and help them, you know, and that's if you even want to. Right, you know, I'm not saying that there's no like there's no bullshit relationships in life, that like, but you have, you know, you just have to be objective, right? You have to be really clear about like, okay, like, you know, do I have to leave, and if I don't, like, how can I restructure this? You know, how can I restructure this, and how can I like, and are those people and I compatible? You know, so cool. Yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Like, I hope that I've basically explained this well, you know. Yeah, I hope I've explained it well, you know. But, and it's like, the ultimate goal is that, like, we're all happy. Because, like, are we happy in relationships that, you know, they're nice relationships? It's not as if they're fucking terrible relationships most of the time. It's that they're nice, you know, we get what we get from them, but it's like we can't really be ourselves, or like we can't seem to get other people to comply with us, and it's like, yeah, it's because it's just incompatible, right? What you, and as such, what you can do is you can learn how you're incompatible, which is like what I talked about in this entry being one of the aspects that you can have a look at, and be like, okay, like, are they I think it's pretty obvious, you know. It's like, are you a more physically inclined person, you know, outgoing, or are you more of an outgoing person, or are you more of like a you know, like a homely, but like also like, you know, a thinker type of person, like, you know, you like to think more, you think deeply, you know, you think like weird dark shit, and like, or versus you like going out and doing weird dark shit, right? You know, and then like be like, okay, well, this person is incompatible with me, so like I think I need to change role in their lives so that I can find people who are more compatible with me, so I can form a home. But it doesn't mean, but like, they're still going to be like great companion, like they're going to be great people in my life, you know, because they can still help me and I can still help them, right? They can help me like do the shit that I'm afraid of, and I can help them communicate and traverse like the kind of motivational side of things, you know, by understanding, like, you know, and like, because like, yeah, it's like with each of them come different strengths. It's like the people who are more physically liberal, they're more likely to get shit done, right? There's a reason. There's a reason why like society is like the majority of society, at least like when you go out, it tends to be more people who are more physically liberal. It's because they get out the fucking house, right? Because like I was kind of like I had a thought to myself like at one point I was like, why is it that most people I meet like seem to be the opposite of me? And it's like because probably because they're at home. I'm the fucking same. Like I have to go to work, right? But when and sometimes I go out and I do a bit of shopping, or I go to like the coffee shop, which I'm about to do right now, and I do some work. But then I go home. I don't fucking like walk the streets and like go biking or play sports or shit. I go straight home, right? Like I have to like force myself to be more outgoing sometimes, right? And like there's merit in that. Just because you're conservative in one way doesn't mean like you should stay that way, but it does mean that like that's what you feel as like your home. Like the liberal side of you is a side that's more like adventurous and like strong and outgoing, and the side of you that's more conservative is more vulnerable and homely, right? So like you have to decide like which is more your home. Like and which is more your exploration, right? As like a meta home, if you will, and then like from there you can then interact with people who maybe are of a different temperament to you, so you can get balanced, right? That's how you set it up. Really, this is a principle that applies to anything, right? You need a home because you are a certain way, right? You are a certain way. You have biases, right? You're more liberal or conservative, in different areas, or you're more strong and, blah, 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 right? And so, like, you need to set up a home that complements that. However, once you've done that, you then go out into the world so that you can balance yourself, right? Because too much of a good thing can be a bad thing, right? But like, having said that, you still need that home so that you don't feel like the black sheep of your group, and, like, just feel like, like, there's no meaning in your life, basically, right? Anyway, so to finish off what I was saying, like, yeah, so like people who like are more like physically liberal, they get shit done. They don't sit at home being like, oh, I don't feel like doing anything. Oh, it's so hard to motivate myself. Oh, I feel so overwhelmed. They go out and fucking do shit, right? They're not worried about like how do I actually succeed. But like people who are people who are more like ideologically liberal, right? The thinkers, they tend to be more like insightful. I was going to use the word wise, but again, like, if you say that to someone like who doesn't like that, then they'll think you're being like disrespectful to them. It's not. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. It's just like I'll use the word insightful. We're more insightful. Like we're able to like cut to the core of like what people are trying to get at. And what is the meaning behind this complex mechanism, right? So like the doers, who are like the SENIs basically, right? The physical liberals, like they go out and do shit, so they're more likely to get shit done and succeed, right? By just being out there and doing and trying, right? But like the intuitives, the NESIs, like the ideological liberals, we tend to be more insightful, more wise, in the sense that like we just think things through, and like we kind of we cut to the core of what like that thing means, and like what's going to happen if like we engage with that thing, right? But of course we're paralyzed by our physical conservatism. Like we're like, oh, I don't want to do anything because I'm too scared, right? And then like the liberal physicals might be like, the physical liberals rather, like they might be doing shit, but like they might get stuck in like a certain kind of way of thinking, and like they just keep, and they basically destroy themselves. Like, it's a potential, right? So yeah, so anyway, like that's my entry. Like really it was just a thought that I had, but I'm hoping that like it will kind of give you an idea in terms of like how, if you feel there's some kind of incompatibility in between you and other people in your life, that you can kind of like figure it out, right? And yeah, you know, the thing is, like, nothing's going to come easy. If you have a problem, like, usually it takes effort and it takes, like, some painful lessons for you to move out of it. Like, I wish I could sugarcoat it, I really did, but, like, it's like, you have to, like, you have to just do it sometimes, right? And, like, yeah, you're going to have that painful conversation where you're like, you know, like, I feel that we're incompatible. And I feel like it would be better if we, like, sort out, like, people who are more compatible with us, but we can still be friends. We can still be, like, people in our lives. It's just like, I feel like, you know, this is just important because it's like, I want me to be happy and I want you to be happy, right? So cool. Anyway, this is a long ass entry, so I'm gonna end it here. Like, I hope it was helpful as always. And if you have any comments or questions, then feel free to leave them in the description section below. I don't know what I'm gonna talk about next week, but like, we'll see. So cool. Maybe something controversial again, but cool. So anyway, keep going on your journey and, like, you know, it'll be fine. Just, like, keep moving forwards and, like, keep being aware and, yeah, you know, and as long as you don't give up, and even giving up is not giving up, then you'll be fine. You know, you'll live another day. Just, you know, keep going. So cool. Until next time, guys, catch you soon. Until then, peace out. Bye-bye now.